My name is Renee Dawson. I was 47 years old when my husband of 22 years texted me, "Happy anniversary, baby," while I was sitting 2 tables above him, watching his hand move to the back of another woman's neck right after he hit send. He didn't know I was there. He didn't know Phyllis was at the bar downstairs memorizing her face. And he had absolutely no idea that the card he used to pay for her dinner, the one I'd never seen before, was about to become the least of his problems. This man had spent months quietly moving our money, signing my name to things I never agreed to, and building a whole second life on the foundation I laid with 22 years of 12-hour shifts and every dream I put on hold for his. He thought I was too tired to notice, too grateful to question it, too far gone to fight back. He had no idea what I'd already found, and he had no idea what I was about to do with it. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. I pressed my hair that evening the same way I'd pressed it for 22 years. Slow, deliberate, section by section. The kind of ritual that holds you together when you're not sure what you're holding yourself together for. The dress was navy. I'd found it on a clearance rack 6 weeks before and told myself it was practical. Good fabric, good price. I didn't tell anyone I'd tried it on 3 times in the fitting room, or that I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night smoothing it over my hips, talking myself out of returning it. I didn't tell anyone I was nervous. 47 years old, married 22 of them, and I was nervous about dinner with my own husband. That should have told me something. I'd spent 2 decades making DeAndre Dawson's life run. I put him through his sales certification when we were still eating rice and canned beans twice a week. I worked double shifts at the county hospital while he built his client list from scratch, called in favors from people I knew, showed up to his work events in heels after 12 hours on my feet. I raised our daughter Imani mostly alone, not because DeAndre was absent exactly, but because the kind of present he was didn't include school pickups or sick nights or the invisible 1,001 things that kept a household breathing. I did all of that, quietly, completely, because that's what love looked like to me. I remember the winter I worked back-to-back holiday shifts so he could fly to Chicago for a conference he said would change everything for us. I came home Christmas morning to an empty house and a card on the counter that said, "You're the reason I keep going." I believed him. Lord, I believed him. Somewhere in the last few years, though, I'd started to feel like a fixture. Something necessary but unnoticed. I'd gained weight after my second pregnancy and never really lost it, and DeAndre had a way of mentioning it. Not cruel, just observational, that left a mark every time. I'd stopped reaching for him in the night, told myself that was just what long marriages became, a kind of comfortable quiet. I even convinced myself the loneliness was mine to manage, some deficiency in me I hadn't yet corrected. I drove to the restaurant telling myself tonight was different. Tonight was ours. I arrived at 7:15. The hostess walked me up to the mezzanine level, elevated, open, with a clear sight line to the whole floor below. I liked it immediately. You could see everything from up there. My oldest friend, Phyllis Okafor, a paralegal at a family law firm, was already downstairs at the bar. I'd invited her for a quick drink before dinner. Just a few minutes, nothing elaborate. She was in a red wrap dress, laughing at something on her phone. Seeing her settled me, the way she always has for the past 20-some years. I ordered water and looked at the menu without reading it. You know what I kept thinking about up there? Whether I still look like a woman worth looking at. Not even by my husband, just in general. Whether the navy dress was doing what I hoped it was doing, or whether I'd just spent $48 convincing myself it was. I was watching the floor below when I noticed the couple at table 14. They were close in the way that people are when they've stopped performing closeness and it's just become their natural distance. The woman laughed, not the kind of laugh you produce for company, but the kind that escapes you, unguarded, easy. He said something and she tilted toward him like a plant toward light. I thought, That's what comfortable looks like. My phone buzzed. Happy anniversary, baby. On my way. I smiled. I looked up from the screen. The man at table 14 was straightening his tie. My jaw locked. It was a deep burgundy tie with a subtle diamond pattern. I knew that tie. I'd wrapped it in silver paper and set it under the tree last December. I'd picked it out because I thought it brought out the warm undertone in his complexion. DeAndre Dawson, my husband, had his hand at the back of that woman's neck. He kissed her slowly, unhurried, the way you kiss someone when you're not afraid of being seen. She laughed again when he pulled back. He checked his watch, said something, smiled. He did not look up. I read the text again. Happy anniversary, baby. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked it up again. I looked at the man below. I looked at the tie. My hands went still. I turned the phone over and typed, "Can't wait. Take your time." I set it down. I signaled the waiter and ordered the pan-seared halibut, the most expensive thing on the menu, and a glass of their best champagne. Then I opened my text, found Phyllis's name, and typed 7 words. Don't come up yet. Stay at the bar. Watch table 14. I set the phone down again. I picked up my water glass. I took one slow sip, and I waited. He kissed her one more time before he left. Quick this time, familiar, the kind of kiss that doesn't ask permission because it stopped needing to a long time ago. Then he pulled back, straightened his jacket, and checked his phone. Even from the mezzanine, I could see the smile, small, private, not meant for anyone else. Tamara. That's who I know her to be now, though I didn't have a name for her yet that night, stayed at the table. She didn't watch him go. She just turned back to her wine glass and lifted it, easy and unhurried, the way you settle into a room you consider yours. He was already halfway to the entrance stairs. I picked up my champagne. I took a sip. I looked at my menu. Let me tell you something about a man who has never been caught. He walks into a room like the room was expecting him. DeAndre came up those mezzanine stairs with his shoulders back and that particular smile he reserves for moments he wants to control. He saw me at the table and his whole face opened up, warm, immediate, the kind of expression that used to make me feel chosen. He hugged me from behind first, arms around my shoulders, chin dropping to the top of my head. "Baby," he said, "you look beautiful." I let him hold me for exactly as long as it took to make sure my face was ready. Then I turned, and I smiled, and I let him kiss my cheek. "You made it," I said. "Traffic was something else." He settled into his chair, shook out his napkin, reached across and squeezed my hand. "You order yet?" "Just the champagne." "Good. Let's do this right." And we did. We did it completely right. He asked about my shift from 2 days ago, the one where I'd mentioned a difficult patient. I told him a cleaned-up version, and he listened with his chin in his hand, nodding. I asked about his day. He said meetings ran long, a client in from out of town, nothing interesting. He said it the way you say something that has been rehearsed just enough to stop sounding rehearsed. I laughed at his jokes. I refilled my water glass. I was performing, and I was better at it than I'd ever given myself credit for. Below us, at table 14, Tamara had her phone out. She was smiling at the screen the way you smile when someone is saying exactly what you want to hear. I watched, from the corner of my eye, as DeAndre's right hand shifted under the table. A brief, practiced movement. Then his jacket pocket, then both hands back on top of the table like nothing happened. I took a bite of my halibut. You know what the worst part was? None of it was new. I just never let myself see it clearly before. The nights he came home from the gym smelling like something other than the gym. The weekend trip to Atlanta 14 months ago, a regional sales conference, he said, and I had pressed his shirts the night before, folded them the way he liked with the collars up, packed his bag on the bed while he showered. I did that. I stood in our bedroom and packed his bag for a trip he was taking to be with someone else, and I kissed him goodbye at the door and told him to text me when he landed. He did text me when he landed. I remember being glad about that. The slow withdrawal I'd carried for 2 years, the distance I'd wrapped in explanations, told myself was a rough patch, a busy season, the natural cooling of a long marriage. I'd made it mine. I'd turned it inward and worn it like something I deserved. My body, my age, the weight I couldn't lose, the promotion I'd turned down because he said it would make me harder to be around. I sat across from him now and watched him lie between bites of a $38 steak. And I understood, for the first time with no softening around the edges, I was not the problem. I was never the problem. I had just been trained to be the first place I looked. I found this place through a colleague, DeAndre said, gesturing around with his wine glass. The sommelier here is supposed to be extraordinary. I wanted tonight to be right. He made the reservation. He never made reservations. Not once in 22 years had that man called ahead and secured a table. I filed it, said nothing. It's perfect, I told him, and I meant it, just not the way he thought. He paid the check with a card I didn't recognize. Not our joint account, not his work card, something else. Matte black with lettering I couldn't make out from across the table. He tucked it back into a slim wallet I'd never seen either. "Men's room," he said, and touched my shoulder as he passed. I waited until he turned the corner. Then I picked up my phone and found Phyllis's name. "That man at your 2 o'clock. Remember his face. I'll call you tonight." I set the phone down. I finished my champagne. The drive home took 22 minutes. I know because I counted. DeAndre had the radio low and his hand on my knee, and he talked the entire way. Somewhere warm for spring, maybe Tulum, maybe Cabo. He'd heard Cabo was incredible in April. His thumb moved in small circles just above my kneecap, the way it used to when we were first married and everything felt like it was just beginning. I looked out the window and watched the streetlights pull past. "You've been quiet," he said. Not suspicious, just noticing. "Tired," I said. "Long week." He squeezed my knee. "We'll sleep in tomorrow." I nodded. I was already somewhere else entirely. At home, he went straight for the wine cabinet, the good shelf, the bottle he saves for occasions. I set my purse on the counter and slipped off my heels. He poured 2 glasses and turned with that smile, the one that used to be enough. "I've got a headache coming on," I said. "I'm going to head up." Something moved across his face. Not concern, recalibration. Then the smile settled back. "I'll check on you in a bit." He didn't. I knew he wouldn't. I climbed the stairs in the dark and sat on the edge of our bed and looked at the clock on my nightstand. 10:41 p.m. I had a shift at 6:30. I allowed myself until 11 o'clock. That's not a figure of speech. I set a soft alarm on my phone, lay back on top of the covers in my anniversary dress, and I cried. Hard at first, the kind that doesn't have any sound because the sound would cost too much. I pressed my forearm across my eyes and I felt 22 years of it move through me. Not just tonight, but everything tonight had confirmed. Every shirt I pressed, every bag I packed, every night I lay in this bed and told myself the silence between us was just what long love looked like when it got comfortable. Every time I caught my reflection in a department store window and looked away a little too fast. Every conference he attended and every card I signed and every version of myself I made smaller so he could feel bigger standing next to me. I cried for all of it. I gave it its 20 minutes. Then the alarm went off and I sat up. I went to the bathroom and washed my face with cold water. I changed into pajamas. I got my laptop from the closet shelf where I kept it for nights I couldn't sleep. I sat at the small desk by the window and I got to work. Divorce law in my state. Marital asset division. How courts handle financial accounts that have been moved or restructured during a marriage. Whether the length and documentation of an affair affects alimony. I read for a long time, following links, taking notes in the small spiral pad I use for my nursing CEU coursework. Clean, precise notes in the margins. Dates, terms, questions to ask. Then I wrote down a name. Everett Boone. Phyllis had said it almost offhandedly 2 years ago, over a second glass of wine at her kitchen table.
talking about a colleague going through a brutal split. "Best in the county," she'd said, swirling her glass. "He doesn't let them leave with anything." I'd barely registered it at the time. I wrote it down carefully now, underlined it once, and closed the laptop. I sat there for a while in the quiet. I thought about the lockbox. It lived on the metal shelving unit in the garage, gray and standard, nothing that would draw your eye. I'd noticed it maybe 2 years into it being there. Asked once what it was.
DeAndre said liability paperwork from an old contract. Said my name being on those documents could actually create problems if anything ever went sideways with the account. Better if I just stayed off it. I'd accepted that. I accepted a lot of things that came in the packaging of "this is for your protection." My hands went still in my lap. What had accepting things cost me? Not just the lockbox. All of it. The promotion I didn't take, the account I signed away without reading, the trips I didn't ask about because asking felt like accusing, and accusing felt like being the kind of wife I didn't want to be. I'd been so careful not to be a problem that I'd left the door wide open. I put the notepad in my purse. I turned off the lamp. I got into bed. By 5:15 the next morning, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror in my pressed uniform, my badge clipped, my hair done, looking at my own face. I stood there for a long time. The woman in the mirror looked tired. She also looked like someone who had made a decision. "You built this," I said, quietly, to no one but her, "which means you can take it apart." I turned off the light. I picked up my bag. I went to work. 3 days after the restaurant, I drove straight from the hospital to my oldest friend Phyllis Okafor's house. Phyllis, who had worked as a paralegal at a family law firm for 11 years, and who knew, without me ever having to explain it, exactly what kind of help I was going to need. I didn't go home first. I didn't change out of my scrubs. I just drove. She opened the door before I got up the porch steps. She took one look at my face and stepped back to let me in. We sat at her kitchen table with 2 mugs of tea neither of us touched. I told her everything. The reservation, the mezzanine, the way his hand sat at the back of that woman's neck like it belonged there. The text, "Happy anniversary, baby," arriving on my phone while I watched him pull her close. The unfamiliar card he used to pay. The phone he checked under the table and slid away without a word. Phyllis cried. Full tears, chin down, one hand pressed flat to her mouth. I did not cry. I had used my 20 minutes. I was somewhere past it now, in a place that was quieter and more dangerous than grief. You know what surprised me? Telling it out loud didn't break me. It clarified things. When Phyllis reached for her own phone, I put my hand over hers. "Not yet," I said. She looked up. "Nothing moves until I have everything in writing." She held my eyes for a long moment. Then she set the phone face down on the table. She took a breath. I watched something shift in her. The best friend stepping back, the paralegal stepping forward. She pulled her notepad from the drawer she always kept one in and uncapped her pen. "Okay," she said. "Walk me through the finances. Everything you know." I started with what I was sure of. My nursing income, direct deposited into our joint checking account for 22 years. The mortgage, drawn from that account automatically. The household bills, utilities, insurance, Imani's last year of tuition before she got her scholarship. I knew those numbers the way I knew a patient's vitals. Steady. Documented. Mine. Then Phyllis asked about savings. I told her about the account. Joint savings, mid-5 figures the last time I'd looked, which, I realized as I said it out loud, had been a while. DeAndre handled the savings transfers. He said it was easier since he tracked the quarterly statements through his work software. I had let him. Phyllis's pen slowed. "When's the last time you saw a statement?" I thought about it. My chest got tight. Maybe 10 months ago? There was something DeAndre had me sign around that time. He said it was a refinance adjustment on the mortgage. Something about the interest rate. "Did you read it?" The mug in front of me had gone cold. "He said it was routine." Phyllis went still. Not the kind of still that means she was thinking. The kind that means she already knew the answer and didn't want to say it. Renee? Her voice had dropped. That may not have been routine. The word routine just sat there between us. She explained it carefully, the way she does when she's being precise. A savings account can be converted from joint to individual with one signature, if the right paperwork is framed the right way, if a person signs without reading, if that person trusts the other person to handle it. 8 months ago, maybe more, he had been moving things, quietly, methodically, piece by piece, the way you pack a house before you tell anyone you're leaving. Not in a rush, not in a panic, deliberately. This wasn't a man who got caught in something that spiraled out of control. This was a man with a plan, an exit, built in the dark, using my name and my income and my signature on documents I never read because he told me I didn't need to. I didn't discover his affair. I interrupted his timeline. My hands went flat on the table. He was going to take everything. I heard myself say it, even, quiet, like I was reading from a chart. He was going to be gone before I knew anything. Phyllis didn't say a word. She just looked at me. I looked back at her. Schedule me with Boone for Thursday. She wrote it down. Late that night, I pulled into my own driveway and sat in the dark car with the engine off. The house was lit in the way it gets when DeAndre goes to bed early. One lamp in the living room left on, the kitchen dark. Everything looked exactly like it always had. That was the part that got me. Just for a second, how unchanged it all looked from the outside. I went in through the front door. DeAndre was already asleep. I could hear the television he falls asleep to, low through the bedroom ceiling. I stood in the kitchen, still in my scrubs, purse still on my shoulder. I turned and looked at the door to the garage. 2 days later, DeAndre packed his rolling bag and kissed me on the cheek and said he'd be back Thursday evening. Conference in Atlanta. The same city as that trip I'd packed his shirts for 3 years ago, ironed the collars, tucked in the pocket square he said made him look like he belonged in the room. I stood at the front door and watched his car back out of the driveway. I waited until he turned the corner at the end of the block. Then I called a locksmith and paid cash. The man came within the hour. He didn't ask questions. I was a woman in my own home, standing next to a lockbox on my own garage shelf, and I had the cash in my hand before he finished the job. He was gone in 20 minutes. I stood there alone. The box was open. Let me tell you something about the moment before you look at something you can't unsee. There's a half second where your body knows and your mind is still catching up. My hand hovered over that lid. Then I lifted it. A burner phone, battery dead. A folder, rubber banded shut. A roll of cash, 50s, I didn't count it right then. I set the phone aside and opened the folder. The lease agreement was on top. 6 pages, standard residential form, the kind I've seen on Phyllis's desk a dozen times. I read the address first. A building downtown, 15 minutes from DeAndre's office. Then the date, signed 6 months ago. Then the names on the signature line. DeAndre Anthony Dawson. And beneath it, Tamara A. Osei. 6 months. I stood in my garage and did the math without meaning to. 6 months of cooking his dinners. 6 months of his dress shirts hung in our closet, pressed and sorted by color the way he likes them. 6 months of his work events, the holiday party, the regional awards dinner, where I stood beside him in heels and smiled at his colleagues and let them call me DeAndre's wife, like that was the whole of me. 6 months of coming home to me, and leaving again, and coming home. The monthly rent was printed clearly on page 2, $2,400, $14,400. I knew where that money came from. I had signed the paperwork that moved it. I had believed the word routine because he said it, and because I had spent 22 years believing that the man I built a life with deserved the benefit of my trust. My jaw locked. I set the lease down. I photographed every page, both sides in order. Then the cash. Then the folder from the front cover to the back. I put everything back exactly as I found it. Rubber band, angle of the folder, phone on top. I closed the lid. I pressed it until the latch caught. I plugged the burner phone into a charger I'd brought from the kitchen and left it on the garage shelf overnight. The next morning, I was up before 5. I stood at the garage shelf in the gray dark and watched the screen come to life. One contact saved, just the letter T. The message thread ran long, longer than I scrolled. I photographed the oldest visible date at the top of the thread, 14 months ago. They had been at this for 14 months. I had been living inside a performance for over a year without knowing I was in the audience. I photographed the most recent message sent 4 days ago, the night after our anniversary dinner, after he came home to me warm and attentive, his hand on my knee in the car, talking about a vacation we should take. Then I found the 3 exchanges Phyllis had told me to look for. Anything financial, anything that showed coordination, anything that proved this wasn't a man acting alone. I didn't have to look hard. Tamara, did you move the account yet? DeAndre, done. 3 words. That was all it took to confirm what I already understood but needed the paper to prove. She wasn't a woman who fell for a charming man and looked the other way. She knew about the account. She asked about it. She was tracking it. She was a collaborator. And her name was on a lease agreement that my money paid for. My hands went still over the phone screen. I took the photograph. I replaced the burner on the shelf, angled exactly as I'd found it. I relocked the box. Then I walked back inside, washed my hands at the kitchen sink, and picked up my phone. I dialed the number I'd had memorized for 3 days. The receptionist answered on the second ring. "Tell Mr. Boone I have documentation," I said. "I'll see him Thursday." Thursday morning. I took a personal day. First one in 11 months. I told the charge desk it was a family matter. That was true enough. I dressed the way I dress for things that matter. Not flashy, not apologetic. Dark slacks, my good blazer, the pearl earrings I wore to my nursing pinning ceremony 22 years ago. I looked in the mirror and I didn't apologize to myself. That was new. The folder was already in the car. I'd spent Wednesday evening organizing it the way I organize a patient chart. Cleanest information on top, everything dated, everything labeled in my own handwriting. 20 years of pay stubs, rubber banded by year. The joint account statement showing the transfer. Photographs of the lease, the burner phone screen, the cash. And the timeline. 3 pages, yellow legal pad, written in pencil because I kept having to go back and move things earlier than I'd first believed. I drove to Boone's office, and I did not turn on the radio. You know what I expected? Some version of sympathy, a box of tissues on the desk, a careful voice, the soft professional performance of someone managing a fragile woman. Everett Boone, the divorce and asset attorney Phyllis had called the best in the county, did none of that. He was 60-something, gray at the temples, reading glasses on a cord around his neck. He shook my hand once and sat down and opened the folder without a word. He read the way I read medical files. Efficiently, without drama, turning pages at a pace that told me he was actually taking it in and not just nodding through it. He got to the lease agreement and stopped. He picked it up. He read it twice. He set it down and looked at the burner phone screenshots. He looked at the timeline. He said, "You've done my job for me." I said, "I didn't know it would need doing." He looked at me over those reading glasses for just a moment. Then he went back to the folder. He laid it out without softening any of it, which I respected. What I had was solid. The marital asset transfer. The account DeAndre moved 8 months ago, under the cover of a document I signed without reading, was legally recoverable. The fact that it happened 8 months before I filed, with no disclosed purpose and no corresponding marital benefit, gave it the shape of financial fraud within the marriage. He used words like dissipation of assets and fraudulent conveyance, and I wrote them both down on the back of my legal pad. The lease agreement placed half of that transferred money directly into a residence DeAndre shared with another woman, while still legally married to me and still drawing on the financial infrastructure I built. That mattered in court. He asked about children. I told him our daughter was 22, a college senior. He nodded and moved on. Then he asked the question that stopped me.
Has your husband taken on any significant business debt in the last year that you weren't informed about or didn't consent to? My hands went still on the legal pad. I saw it again without meaning to. The company holiday party, 4 months back. I was standing near the drinks table with a glass of something sparkling, and DeAndre's business partner passed by and looked right at me and then looked away, quickly. The way people look away when they owe you something they haven't paid. I'd filed it, the way I file everything. I'm not sure, I said, but I think DeAndre's business partner knows more than I do. He had a reaction at their holiday party that I didn't understand at the time. I looked at Boone. Can you look into the loan structure on the business side? He wrote it down. No follow-up question, no reassurance, just the pen moving. That was worth more to me than any amount of sympathy. He filed the preliminary paperwork that afternoon, while I was still in the building finishing the intake forms at the front desk. He came out once to hand me a copy of the filing confirmation and told me DeAndre would be formally served within the week. The clock had started. DeAndre didn't know it yet. He was in Atlanta, or wherever he actually was, and he would come home tomorrow, and the house would look exactly the same, and I would look exactly the same, and he would have no idea that the ground under everything he took had already shifted. I sat in my car in the parking garage for a few minutes before I started the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief exactly. It was more like the feeling after a long shift when you finally sit down. Not happiness, just the recognition that you held it together when it counted, and now you can breathe. I breathed. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. I glanced at it. DeAndre, home tomorrow night. Miss you. I put the phone in my bag. I had groceries to pick up, the house still needed running, the plan still needed protecting, and I had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous thing a woman in my position could do was let the routine slip before she was ready. I pulled out of the garage and drove toward the store. Friday evening. He came through the door with tulips, pink ones, wrapped in that brown paper from the florist on Clement Street. The good florist, not the grocery store. He knew I could tell the difference. That was the point. Thought you could use these, he said, and smiled the smile that used to work on me, the warm one, the one that said, I see you. I took them. I said thank you. I put them in water. That was all he got. He tried again over dinner. A weekend away, Savannah maybe, or that bed and breakfast in the hills we went to for our 15th anniversary. He talked about it with his fork in his hand, painting the picture, his voice easy and generous. He said I deserved a break. He said I'd been working too hard. I told him that sounded nice. He watched me the way you watch a door you're not sure is locked. Let me tell you something about a man who has always used charm as a steering wheel. When the wheel stops responding, his first instinct isn't to check the road. It's to grip harder. Later, after the dishes, he came up behind me in the kitchen and put his hand against my cheek. Gentle. His thumb moved once, slowly, like punctuation, like a question. I stood still. I did not lean in. I did not pull away. I was a wall with good posture, and he felt every inch of it. He dropped his hand. That's when he switched lanes. It was casual. That's always how it goes with DeAndre. The cruelest things arrive wrapped in concern. He poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and said he'd been thinking about us both getting healthier, more intentional about it. He said it the way a man says something he has rehearsed to sound unrehearsed. I mean, we're not getting any younger, Renee, and I've noticed you've kind of let yourself go a little. I'm not trying to be harsh. I just love you, and I want us both to be around for a long time. My jaw locked. 22 years of that language, dressed up in different clothes every time. I'm saying this because I care. I'm saying this because I love you. He had kept me measuring myself against a standard he set and moved at will, and I had spent too many mornings apologizing to my own reflection because of it. I looked at him. I kept my voice level. You're right, I said. I should take better care of myself. I set down my dish towel and went upstairs. He wanted me rattled. He wanted the old response,
the quiet withdrawal, the softened posture, the subtle shrinking that told him his grip was still good. Instead, he got a closed door and silence, and I knew from 22 years of living with that man that silence frightened him in a way no argument ever could.
I did not think about him again that night.
The following Tuesday, Boone called me on my lunch break. His investigator had confirmed the loan structure. DeAndre had taken out a business line of credit 11 months ago, and the application listed my nursing income, my salary, my employment history, my credit, as the primary debt service qualification. My name on the paperwork. My signature, or something close enough to it that a busy loan officer didn't look twice. Boone's instructions were simple. Request a meeting with Raymond, DeAndre's business partner of 6 years. Frame it as a paperwork question. Keep it short. Raymond agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near his office. He was nervous before he sat down. I could see it in the way he kept his jacket on indoors. I put the loan document on the table between us. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just asked him to walk me through what he remembered about the application process, what DeAndre told him, what he verified himself. He lasted about 8 minutes before he stopped pretending. He said DeAndre told him I had approved everything. He said he never called me directly to confirm because DeAndre handled the paperwork side of things, and that was just how they operated. He said he figured I knew because why wouldn't I know? Then he said the part that stayed with me. He said you didn't really understand the financial documents, that you trusted him to handle it. He wasn't looking at me. He said it was easier that way. My hands went flat on the table. He wasn't wrong about that part, I said. I stood up. I thanked Raymond for his time. I told him Everett Boone would be reaching out within the week and that he should have his own attorney present for that conversation. He didn't say anything. He looked like a man doing arithmetic on a very bad sum. I walked out into the afternoon air and called Imani, my daughter, who was finishing her senior year 3 hours away. She picked up on the second ring. "Mama?" "Hey, baby." I kept my voice even. "I need to see your face. Can you come home this weekend?" A beat of silence. Then, "I'll leave Friday after class." "Good," I said. "That's good." Friday evening, she pulled up just after 6, her old Civic packed the way only a college girl's car gets packed. A duffel bag, a laundry tote, a backpack with one broken zipper held shut with a hair tie. I heard the car door and came to the front porch. She took one look at my face and didn't say a word about it. She just grabbed her duffel and came up the steps and hugged me the way she has since she was 7. Both arms, full weight, no performance. "You eaten?" I asked. "Not really." "Good. Come help me." She dropped her bag in the hallway and followed me back to the kitchen, where I already had onions going in the pan and a pot of rice on low. She washed her hands without being asked, I raised her right, and picked up the cutting board without me pointing to it. We moved around each other the way we always have, quiet and easy, 2 people who know where the other one stands. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just handed me the garlic when I reached for it. You know what I have always loved most about my daughter? She has never needed to fill silence with noise. She learned early that some things announce themselves when they're ready. I let a few minutes go by. Let the smells settle in. Let the kitchen be what the kitchen always was, the room where things got said that couldn't get said anywhere else. I turned the heat down and leaned against the counter. "Things are changing around here," I said. "I need you to know that going in. And I need you to trust me and stay steady while it happens." Imani set down her knife. She turned and looked at me with those level eyes she got from nobody. Certainly not from me. Certainly not from her father. She developed those on her own. "Okay," she said. "I trust you." Just like that. No negotiation. My throat tightened, but I kept moving. I picked up the wooden spoon and stirred the pot. "Tell me something," I said. "What do you remember about growing up, about your father and me?" She was quiet for a moment, long enough that I didn't rush her. I just kept stirring, slow circles, and waited. Then she said it. "Mama." Her voice was careful and clear. "I remember you doing everything. I remember you looking tired. I remember Daddy getting credit." I kept stirring. I had carried 22 years in that kitchen, early mornings and late nights and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays, all of it passing through this same room, this same stove. I used to make DeAndre's lunch the night before so he could sleep an extra 20 minutes. I remember the particular smell of the coffee I had ready for him every morning without being asked, even the mornings I was running late for a 12-hour shift. I did those things because I loved him. I understand now that he received them as his due. I kept stirring. "I need you to know," I said finally, "that whatever happens next, I'm going to be fine." She didn't move for a second. Then, "Did he hurt you?" I set down the spoon. I looked at my daughter, 22 years old, standing in my kitchen with flour on her sleeve and those steady eyes, waiting for the truth. "He tried to," I said, "but I caught him before he finished." She held my gaze. She nodded once. She picked up her knife and went back to cutting. That was all we needed. Later that night, Imani fell asleep before 10, the way young people do, completely, without ceremony. I listened until the house settled around her. Then I went back downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table and I opened the folder. I laid everything out the way I would lay out a patient chart. The restaurant receipt, date stamped. The lease agreement with both names on the signature line. The screenshots from the burner phone. The oldest date, the most recent, and the 3 exchanges that told the whole story in plain language. The loan document with my name on it that I never signed. The preliminary divorce filing Boone submitted 13 days ago, the one DeAndre still knew nothing about. I organized it precisely, no wasted space, each document facing the same direction, in the order a person would need to read them if they were sitting across from me at this table. I did not feel angry. I felt clear, the way a room feels after you open all the windows. I closed the folder. I placed it in the center of the table, where the fruit bowl used to sit before I moved it. Then I turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs. I was in bed by 11. I heard his car in the driveway at 11:42. The headlights swung across the ceiling. The engine went quiet. His key in the lock, the particular sound his shoes made on the hardwood, the familiar sequence of a man moving through a house he thought was still his. I closed my eyes. I was ready. Saturday morning. I was up at 6. I made the coffee the way I always made it, strong, 2 scoops past what the directions called for, because that's how this household drank it. I set 2 mugs on the counter, then I stopped and put one back. I only needed one this morning. I set the table, placemats, napkins folded the way my mother taught me, orange juice in the good glasses because it was the weekend, and that's what we did. I moved around that kitchen the way I had moved around it for 15 years, and I let the familiarity of it steady me. Then I placed the folder at his seat and sat down at mine. I did not pace. I did not rehearse. I just sat with my coffee and let the morning be quiet. He came downstairs at 7:45. I heard him on the stairs, the particular rhythm of a man who slept well and expected a normal Saturday. He turned the corner into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me already seated. His eyes moved to the folder, then back to me. He smiled, that reflex smile, the one that had bought him 22 years of smooth landings. "What's all this?" he said. "Sit down, DeAndre." He pulled out his chair. He sat. He kept the smile at half power, like a man who wasn't sure yet whether to turn it up or let it go. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I laid out the restaurant receipt first. Date stamped, table for 2, downstairs, time stamped 40 minutes before his reservation with me upstairs. I placed it flat in front of him so he could read every word. "I was on the mezzanine," I said. "I saw you walk in. I watched you kiss her. And then my phone lit up." I paused. "You texted me happy anniversary while your hand was on her neck." He opened his mouth. "Don't," I said. He closed it. I laid out the lease next, both names on the signature line, his and Tamara's. 6 months of a downtown apartment. 6 months of me ironing his shirts and making his plate and attending his work dinners on his arm, while he maintained a second home with another woman. That's when the smile died completely. He looked at the lease for a long time. Something moved across his face that I hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not exactly. Something smaller. Something that looked a lot like a man seeing himself clearly for the first time and not being able to look away fast enough. "How did you get into that box?" he said. My hands stayed still. "That's what you want to know?" I said. Not a question, just the fact of it sitting between us. You know what that moment felt like? It felt like putting down something very heavy that I had been carrying for so long, I forgot it had a weight. I kept going. The burner phone screenshots. The oldest date, the most recent, and the one where Tamara wrote, "Did you move the account yet?" And he wrote, "Done." I placed Raymond's written statement beside it. I placed the loan document last. My name on collateral I never agreed to. A signature that wasn't mine on a line that was. "The preliminary filing went in 10 days ago," I said. "Boone's office. You'll be served this week." His face changed. The fear that moved through it was real. The first real thing I'd seen from him since I sat down. "Renee," his voice dropped, "this will end me. You understand that? The loan audit alone. The firm will open an investigation. This will end everything I've built." I looked at him. "I know exactly what it will do," I said. "I thought about it very carefully." He leaned forward, and then he did the last thing I expected. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. His voice went soft. The charm came back, but different this time. Thinner, like fabric washed too many times. "Baby, I love you. This got away from me, I know that. I know what I did. But I can fix this. I swear to you, I can fix it if you let me. We don't have to blow everything up. 22 years, everything we built together. You'd walk away from all of it?" I looked at his hand on mine. I heard the stairs. Imani came into the kitchen in her socks, hair still wrapped, moving slow the way she always moved on weekend mornings. She stopped when she felt the room. Her eyes went to the folder, to her father's face, to mine. She pulled out the chair beside me and sat down. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. DeAndre looked at his daughter. Whatever he was about to say next, it didn't come. He just looked at her, and she looked back at him with those level eyes, and the silence was the most devastating thing in the room. I slid the divorce paperwork across the table. Then I stood up. I turned back to the stove. I cracked 2 eggs into the pan. 2, not 3. And I finished making breakfast. For myself. For my daughter. He took the folder upstairs. Imani and I ate. The eggs were good. The coffee was strong. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard, and the morning light was coming through the window at that low, warm angle it gets in autumn. The kitchen was quiet. It was entirely mine. The consequences didn't announce themselves. That's the thing nobody tells you. You expect sirens. You expect a moment. What you get is a Tuesday phone call and a certified letter and a name on an administrative notice that used to sleep in your bed. Boone's filing triggered the audit. Raymond cooperated within 48 hours, fully, completely, with documentation Boone said he'd never seen produced that fast. Raymond was protecting himself, and I understood that. I didn't need his motives to be clean. I just needed his signature on the statement, and I had it. DeAndre's company opened the internal investigation on a Wednesday. He was placed on administrative leave before the month was out. He called me twice that first week. I let both calls go to voicemail. My attorney handled the rest. 6 weeks after the confrontation, the court awarded me the house, the primary accounts, and restitution tied directly to the fraudulent loan amount. Every dollar DeAndre had moved into that solo account was traced, documented, and returned. The loan he took out in my name, the one built on my nursing income, my 22 years of steady, invisible work, remained entirely his responsibility. He moved into the downtown apartment. I changed the locks on a Thursday and went to work on Friday. You want to know the part that still sits with me? Not what he lost, what she decided. Within 2 months of the civil complaint naming her, Tamra Osei quietly resigned from the firm. The co-signed lease, the asset conspiracy messages, the professional exposure, the infrastructure she had been comfortable inside collapsed the moment I took mine back. DeAndre, with no income and an ongoing legal matter, turned out to be a significantly less interesting man. She left. No announcement, no drama, just gone. The way people go when the arrangement stops working. I never said a word about her publicly. I didn't need to. I just filed the paperwork. I called DeAndre's mother on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after the filing. I had known that woman for 22 years. She deserved to hear it from me, not from a rumor that reached her sideways through a nephew or a church friend. She listened without interrupting. I kept it plain. I told her what he did, what I found, and what I did about it. I didn't cry. I didn't editorialize. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Renee. You deserved better than my son gave you." That was the only apology I received from anyone in that family, from anyone connected to any of it, really. My jaw released in a way I hadn't noticed it was tight. It was enough. It was exactly enough. 2 years later, I repainted the living room the first spring, a warm terracotta I had been looking at in a magazine for 3 years and never bought because DeAndre said it was too bold. The second year, I did the bedroom, a soft, deep blue, the color of early morning before the light fully arrives. I stood in the middle of that room when I was done and turned in a slow circle and thought, this is what it feels like to take up space. I accepted the charge nurse position in September of that second year. My floor supervisor had offered it to me once before, 3 years ago, and I had turned it down because DeAndre said the longer hours would make me harder to be around. I thought about that the morning I signed the acceptance letter. I thought about it, and then I set the pen down and went to get my coffee. I bought myself new shoes for the first day. Phyllis made the reservation. Same restaurant, mezzanine level. She asked specifically for that table, and the hostess, who didn't know and didn't need to, seated us without ceremony. Imani slid in across from me, still in her coat, carrying a folder of graduate school applications she wanted our opinions on. Phyllis arrived 2 minutes late and immediately ordered champagne before she sat down, which was exactly right. We talked about the applications, 2 programs in particular that Imani was trying to decide between. We talked about Phyllis's new man, who was 61 and a retired band director, and apparently said things that made Phyllis laugh so hard she had to leave the room. We talked about him for a good 15 minutes, and none of it was serious, and all of it was wonderful. We laughed the way you laugh when there's nothing left to manage, nothing left to perform, and nowhere else you'd rather be. The food was good, the champagne was cold, the light in that room was exactly the same as it had been 2 years ago, warm and low, spilling across the tables like it had nowhere urgent to go. Dessert arrived. My phone buzzed against the table. I glanced at the screen. DeAndre's name. "I'm sorry. I know it's too late. I just needed to say it." I read it once. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked up my fork. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!